I apologize for a tad bit of tardiness, but I wanted to make sure everyone was in here. So I think I've mentioned to most of the folks at the table, we are opening with a presentation from our students from Enrollment, so there will not be sound because there will be several students participating. So for those of you who are watching us, it'll look like a short break to you all. Dr. Martin, would you like to say anything before we adjourn to go over?
Kathy's going to say something first.
She's coming.
She's coming. Here we are.
Okay.
Ta-da!
You know, from Al High School, I've done my part now.
Well, thank you for joining us with your students. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So I'm Phoebe Dillard. I teach at Enrollment High School, and thank you guys so much for having us. The reason we did this show is to give students a voice. The entire show was written by them. So I got the idea from one of my old theater teachers actually, and kind of the skeleton was actually devised in his grad work at Virginia Tech. And so I kind of called him up and I was like, hey, I think this is a really important piece, and I just got some advice from him. And so it's really cool because you can tailor it to any venue, to any environment, to any group of people. So what you're seeing applies to Enloe High School students. So the opening and the closing of the show, and you'll see kind of an abridged version of the opening, was completely done by us. But pretty much I started it by saying, what's important? What do we want to say? And so we kind of got a lot of ideas of what we wanted to say about Enloe, and then the kids kind of took it from there. And so every single person who wrote the show was also in the show minus 3 people. So we had 3 writers and then we had about 20 actors. And so all of them just wrote them. They weren't necessarily in them, so some of them wrote scenes that they weren't in, but we had about 2 or 3 writers per scene. I mean, we covered politics, we covered sexual orientation, and we devised them in all different kinds of ways. So we did performance art. Some were breaking the fourth wall, which is talking to the audience, which some of the scenes you'll see are like that. And we actually did it site-specific at Enloe, which was really cool because site-specific theater is where you travel around to each scene, and each scene typically takes place in a different location. I wanted that because these scenes were about what our students go through, what they observe, what they themselves have experienced or observed from others. And so there was a scene about pressures to have sex. And so that scene was done in a hallway where a situation like that might happen, a conversation like that might happen. I didn't provide any like hard facts. I didn't want to kind of preach to the audience and be like, this is what we should believe in. So it was left very open-ended because I think a lot of times conversations with kids are like that, where they don't know what to do, and there's several options out there. But ultimately, I just really wanted to showcase the kids' voice. So the 2 scenes you will see are about diversity. So one is diversity in the classroom, where it's kind of kids on teachers, or kids on counselors, and then also a scene that happens within a cafeteria. So the scene, if you walk in and to the left, that's kind of supposed to take place in a cafeteria, and then the scene in the classroom, which is the first scene that you'll see after the opening, is a scene that would happen in a classroom. So, and we have some programs that we brought, so that kind of just has a little like director's message in there, which is why I wrote the show, or I didn't write the show, but what I wrote for the show and everything like that. So again, thank you guys so much for bringing us here. We're super excited, and without further ado, love for you guys to come see us.
All right, so logistics. We're going to go out. For the opening, we're going to sit in the area in front of the board table. After the opening, we will move to the left, which is the classroom scene. After the classroom scene, we will all move over to the cafeteria.
You will be our teacher leader. We will follow.
I will be a teacher leader. It should be fairly obvious.
I don't know.
And let me also just briefly introduce Ms. Coco Thornton, who is the senior theater teacher at Enloe, and Robert Bird, right? Joseph Bird, who is the tech teacher at Enloe, who also joined us. We work together so much. We're hanging you out.
Crowder, our liaison, and I are here to give you an update on some of the items that are in the going on in the legislature with bills, as well as things that have made crossover. In your materials, you have the traditional spreadsheets that Courtney provides as well. We also provided for you the NCASA's summary of legislative actions that are taking place. So I'll turn to Mr. Crowder as well as Jonathan. We'll have some things to add as well.
Thank you for that, and good afternoon. I think one of the things that I wanted to, Madam Chair and board members, thank you for the time. One of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about, obviously, is the where we are in the state budget process. Senate Bill 259 has obviously passed. It's the Senate's attempt at the budget, and I don't know if I know there's been a lot of information that's gone around about it. There are certain things that the Senate would note as highlights of what they proposed. You know, the enrollment growth funding for K-12, driver education funding, which is a reimbursement program that's been proposed in a very dense piece of policy in the budget. $14 million for a teacher bonus pilot programming, some things that they've highlighted in their bill. What we are doing, just as I described in the last time I gave you an update, is making sure that we're following the language, the actual policy language that's in this bill. In your spreadsheet that you have, I tried to indicate where there are bills that we've been tracking that have also shown up in the budget document that we'll continue to track both as a part of the policy, as a part of the budget discussion, but also as an individual pieces of legislation.
So that's the X.
That's why we put the
Thank
that's why I put the X
you.
next to those items. So so what you actually have in that spreadsheet is, you know, those items that are with the exception of a few bills that I'm actually still trying to get confirmation as to how the rules will treat a couple of the bills. That spreadsheet includes everything that's made crossover, and again, that X indicates those bills that are also embedded in the Senate's budget. The staff here at the system, they are working with me, Dr. Connolly and others, to make sure that we are looking at some of those things for specific impacts to the district, so that as the House continues to contemplate what they're going to propose in their budget, that we have some reaction for them, that we're able to sort of give them some specific reaction to some of the proposals in the budget, and so that's sort of how we are approaching the budget, the Senate's proposal right now. What I'll also say is, as a matter of timing, with the budget, you know, right now is also the time where, you know, inside the building, everyone's speculating about when we might see the House proposal. Right now, there's been some discussion that it could be as soon as going into the Memorial Weekend break, but most of the rumor mill has it, you know, just on the other side of Memorial Day. So we're still within 3 weeks, and we're obviously working hard with staff to make sure that we do an analysis of implications that we've seen in the Senate, but so that we can give some reaction to the House as they go forward. So I wanted just to give you guys that, and if there are more questions, we can talk about those later. There are a few other things I wanted to make sure that we spent some time on, and the first up, I'll go ahead and kick it over to Jonathan and talk a little bit about House Bill 183, which is the Retirement Administration Changes Act of 2017, which is an agency bill of the State Treasurer's Office. Section 8 of that bill has some specific language that Jonathan just wanted to make sure you were aware of.
So a couple years ago, the General Assembly passed a law that sort of went under the title of pension spiking. It's really, it was a law that the General Assembly put in place to try to keep the retirement system solvent out of concerns that the retirement system would have to pay out more than they had taken in from contributions. It was really less about pensions spiking as much as it was just when there was an imbalance in the amount of money that the retirement system received versus what they anticipated that they would have to pay out over time. And to try to sort of equalize that, the General Assembly put in place this law, which in essence says that when an employee retires, and it would have to be a highly compensated employee making over $100,000, that the last employer would be responsible for could be a very substantial payment to try to equalize the retirement system's determination that there could be some liability that the system would have that didn't equate to the amount of money that the retirement system took in. There was a lot of concerns raised about the formula that the retirement system came up with to determine when there would be liability and when there wouldn't be liability, and there was a lot of concerns raised about overall fairness because it was the last employer who was the one that would have to pay the entire thing even if somebody worked in other districts. And there's been lawsuits that have been filed as a result of it, and one of the primary areas of concerns in the lawsuit is that the retirement system didn't go through a process called rulemaking, where you put out rules and go through public feedback and comment before rules adopted. And the lawsuit alleges that the retirement system needed to go through that process. And so there was a hearing last week on this, and we're awaiting a decision on whether the retirement system in fact did need to go through rulemaking. What this law would do was to specifically say that the retirement system doesn't have to go through rulemaking as it determines its formula for deciding when there would be liability, so-called pension spiking, and when there wouldn't be. So that's what this would do. And I think that certainly based on the school boards that are involved in those lawsuits, the position would be, well, since this is such an important rule that would need to be put in place, it should have the light of day and plenty of opportunity for public feedback before it's implemented. So that's what. But this law moving forward would say, irrespective of what happens in the lawsuit, then moving forward the retirement system would not have to go through rulemaking in establishing its formula.
There's one other quick update I want to make sure that I make you aware of, and that's today in the House Education Committee, there was this morning at 10 a.m. there was the hearing on House Bill 866. Which is which is in your spreadsheet. It's the last, I think on the House side, it may be one of the last items. That's the Public School Building Bond Act, a $1.9 billion bond proposal. Essentially the bond, were it to make the, were this bill to pass and it would make the ballot, would essentially make that $1.9 billion available to LEAs, and giving each LEA a certain amount of money based on 4 categories: ADM, low wealth, ADM growth, and small county. Sort of for Wake County's part, that would amount to, we would get money in 2 of those categories at a proposed level of $169 million. The committee discussion today was robust. I mean, we've got a couple of pages of notes. I won't bore you with all that detail, but suffice it to say, the bill passed, out of committee overwhelmingly. Not sure exactly when it will make the House budget or the House calendar for full House discussion. But there was, like I say, it was pretty much the entirety of the committee meeting this morning, and so I wanted to make sure that I brought that to your attention. Yes, sir.
In a previous state bond, there'd been a matching requirement for local funds. I think it went from 3 to 1 to 1 to 3 based on the size and the wealth determination of the county. Wake County was in the 3 to 1 end of the spectrum, $3 local to $1 state. Anything like that in this legislation?
Looking, do a quick read on it. And I don't see anything, just reading over the full bill quickly.
Okay, good.
But I'll read a little bit more closely and get that to everyone. But I did want to make sure that I brought that to your attention. It was mentioned, I think a couple of, the School Boards Association came out in support of it. Association of County Commissioners, as this is a priority item for them.
Good.
So Tim Louder spoke, Frank Till, Dr. Till spoke. So there were a number of speakers. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that bill has started moving in the House at least, and so just of course we're tracking it. That's what I want to make sure you were aware of.
Any quick questions? Since we're a few minutes behind, but just want to make sure you all have what you need before we move on. John?
I just wanted to note, if you may have picked it up, but in the Senate budget bill, section 7.30A, it's got sort of the same language about school systems not able to sue the county over funds that's in the Senate bill 531, so that's now in 2 places.
All right, thank you, Mr. Crowder, thank you, Dr. Conlon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Up next, Ms. Kinsey doing? All right.
She's coming.
So we added this agenda item anticipating the county's budget being presented yesterday. Not sure where to start. I can say any questions. I do want to note the county had gone back and forth with finance and budget, asking questions concerning our finances. And one of the items they sent us was a spreadsheet that was completed by the county with numbers over the past 2 years, 2015-16 and then 16-17. We didn't totally agree with how the spreadsheet was built. We changed some numbers within the spreadsheet, sent it back and made some additional recommendations. That is where the $21 million figure is coming from, was projections made as of the end of March with where we were with our finances for this year. Now, with their projections, they're including fund balance as revenue. If you look at their spreadsheet, which is, we do not consider fund balance revenue. We have county appropriation, we have other revenues, then we have excess revenues over expenditures, or the other way around, excess expenditures that are greater than revenues, and then we have fund balance used, and that's how it's created in both our comprehensive annual financial report and the county's comprehensive annual financial report. We both report it the same way. The $21 million is a difference between budget and projections, and those projections have changed now. They change daily. We spend, as I present to you every year, we spend roughly $5 million a day in the school system. So every day a projection is going to change. They have changed today. But the other thing I want to note, this $21 million is based on budget versus actual. Budget does not create fund balance. Excess revenues over expenditures will increase your fund balance. But budget is not a real number. Just because a budget and an actual number are different, that does not create fund balance for the school system. And one of the notes, and I don't know how much in depth you've seen the presentation, they showed that we had $20 million last year. Well, if you look at our financials last year, you will see that we had expenditures greater than revenues, and we actually had a drop in our fund balance of $9 to $11 million. I don't remember which number was which, but it was somewhere around the $10 million range that we had a reduction in fund balance last year, where budget to actual showed 20 million, but that's not true. And over the past 3 years, we have dropped in our fund balance, and we've talked about that as we do both the budget presentation and the presentation for the financials, that we're reducing that fund balance every year, which causes us to reduce, by your board policy, by contributing 50%, we have reduced our contribution to balance the budget on an annual basis. So this year we have $6.9 million, which is 50% of the $13.9 million undesignated or unappropriated fund balance that is available.
Say that again.
Yeah.
This year,
we have
for putting together
appropriated,
next year's budget?
for next year's budget, we
Okay.
have appropriated $6.9 million, which per your fund balance policy is 50% of our total unappropriated fund balance from the previous year, which is how the fund balance policy is written. So our total unappropriated fund balance is $13.9 million for 2016, and we put in 50% of that to balance the budget this year.
So that's, the 13.9 is our audited fund balance unrestricted from the audit we received in November.
Correct.
And that 6.9 is on page 42. But that, I appreciate that explanation, because it is difficult for, we need to explain that to our commissioners, to the community, as best we can, so that I might need to replay this work session again so I can make sure I'm quoting the numbers correctly. But we have appropriated half of our fund balance, and I was at a forum last night where we did cite from the 10-year trend how that fund balance has been reduced. But
Right, and we do the unappropriated, we do 50% because the remainder of the fund balance is committed. Yes.
I also wanted to mention that in your budget, as you know, each quarter, we look in the current year to see places where things may be costing us more or less than anticipated. And at the time that your budget was developed, our net savings, or over-under savings, which is reported to you quarterly, was included in your budget. So on page 131 of the board's budget, we reduced next year's base budget by $4.3 million because at that time, we knew that's how much savings we have in the current year budget that will not be spent based on activity through the third quarter, approximately. So $4.3 million is already removed from next year's base because we already know those dollars will roll the fund balance because we would not need them in this fiscal year because of savings that have occurred.
The point of that is that would not be included in the number you saw yesterday, the 21 million. That's 4 million. So it should be reduced from that. It should be reduced.
Sorry.
So 2 points. One, I'd like to observe slightly maybe from a different perspective that it sounds to me like the county has argued that we need a budget of 36 or 37 million because they've stated you need 16. They've suggested that there is 21 million in a fund balance. Now, I think I agree that there's not that much dollars there, but when you listen to their argument says there's $21 million here, there's 16 million here, that says 37 million. So that suggests to me that the county believes that there is a need for 37 million. The question is, how do we pay for it? I would argue that it is irresponsible to pay ongoing expenses with one-time monies.
Absolutely.
So even if we had 21 million in the fund balance, if you look at our history, our fund balance is not growing. So if you look at our history, this is not a growth area. These are one-time monies. And if we pay down one-time monies this year, then you're going to only have to double it in the upcoming year. So one part of me says, okay, they've at least agreed to the need. Now, the other point that I want to highlight that I discovered this last night when I was digging through the county budgets and some numbers. So I think they recognize our need. They've suggested, and it's been talked about in Facebook and in their budget, that they've increased per pupil funding to a total contribution of $2,633 per student. Well, that struck me as an ironic number, even though they're claiming that this number is the greatest that has, this would be the highest per pupil funding in county history, even after adjusting for inflation. Well, that struck me as strange when I looked at our budget, because our budget, which allegedly was a much higher ask, had a per pupil of $2,599. So I started asking some questions. Where did the difference come from? If I take their number of the budget, which is the $425.91 million, and I divide it by their 2,633, I get a number that is 161,758.4. If you look on page 5, you will see that the projected Wake County Public School enrollment is 161,757. Their number ignores the 13,349 charter school students, which must be part of the denominator when you're looking at per pupil dollars. So my point is, if you take their budget number and divide it by our total number of students, Wake County Public School and charter, you now have a per capita of $2,432 is what their budgeted number is. $200 below what they are claiming they are giving, but they're claiming that they're giving it because I believe they expected that is our need. So if we would actually take that extra $200 per student, which is what they're saying is apparently appropriate, and multiply it by the 13,349 charter students, you have a budget ask that is significantly higher than our budget ask. Therefore, I would like to recommend that we compromise with the commissioners, recognizing the need that they have stated is appropriate, and go for our ask, which is $2,599 per student instead of the $2,633 per student. We will recognize their need. They will have to recognize the charter students, which they must pay. So I believe that they have already given us the need that we have, and we've given them a good deal.
I know. I'm looking at Mark, I'm like, did you follow all this one?
I didn't see you writing down
Yeah,
numbers.
he-
No, we've already gone there.
I was looking at both of them, I was like, they look like, they're like, yes, we.
That's a $35 million plus mistake.
So we've got a county budget. We have a county budget proposal
That ignore charters.
that ignores the 13,000 students that must be, the funding for those students that must be shared with charters.
Correct.
That's unfortunate.
And necessary.
That the
It's
county
unfortunate
staff-
that they missed it,
Unfortunate.
but
that
it
county
is
staff
important
has
to
put
recognize that
manager in
they
that position.
recognized our need.
I understand.
That's clear as a bell. To me, I mean, I get that. I get it, everybody gets it.
I'm going to ask a simple elementary question for us. Can you explain to us again what ends up in that unrestricted fund balance? Is it savings? It's savings across our entire budget.
So-
And how does a dollar end up in our unrestricted fund?
So there's some descriptions on page 41 in the budget, which will give some of the description. So only local dollars will go into fund balance. You only have an increase in fund balance when you have more revenues than you do have expenditures for the year, which we have not had for several years now. We've had excess expenditures. However, because we maximize savings through federal and state dollars and use it to the best of our abilities, that creates a gap in our local dollars where we might create savings to run to full balance. So It's only local dollars. We cannot put state or other dollars into our fund balance. However, by maximizing the savings and getting the best use out of state and federal dollars, that gives us that advantage to save what. And state and federal, of course, we revert if we do not use.
And there are some recommendations in the Senate budget that will take away some of the flexibility that we've been utilizing in state funds, and we will not be able to get as much savings, which would actually end up being a cost for next year if that is approved.
So that's necessary to, I think, for us to point out, is that some of the flexibility will take away our great stewardship that we've been able to exercise. That Wayne was here for next year.
That would be an unanticipated risk and an additional expense that's a
right.
legislative impact.
Right,
Right.
right.
Well, somewhere between 2 and 4.
4 and 5.
Oh.
It's over $2 million for both AIG and LED restrictions that they would put in place.
Would you say that again?
I know.
Yes.
It's over between $4 and $5 million because in the Senate's proposed budget, they would no longer allow us flexibility with the use of limited English proficiency and academically and intellectually gifted funds. So we would no longer be able to put most experienced teachers in those categories on our position alignments. And when we were able to do that, the district saved $4.5 to $5 million in total for the 2 programs. By undoing that, we'll have an additional cost because of that next year, if that is approved in the final state budget.
It's something for Mr. Crowder to keep track of for us, which I know he is.
I know we've talked about this. What is the impact on our school system if we zero out that fund balance?
A heart attack for me.
Well, I would put it, let me take it.
Let's talk about
The county manager said in a recent conversation, if you get to where you really need assistance, we will help you. So his and I think their position would be, the commissioners will bail us out if we need help. On that one, I had to simply say, as soon as HB 13 showed up, I didn't hear anybody offering to help. So I'm not as confident that that will be a solution. We will help you if you get in a jam. I am more worried about the impact of HB 13 in class size during the next 12 months. And if there was ever a reason for us to need a place to go, that's got to be it. Because if we exceed a class by 1 student, I am breaking the law. And I will have to put a teacher in there immediately. Where am I going to go? So I've got to have that reserve to hire one-time teachers to finish the year to address class size across all those elementary schools. And that's also not anticipating what we don't yet know about the capital impact, if we've got to be moving mobiles, if we've got to. So if there was ever a justification for having something we can go to, I'm feeling it a whole lot this coming year. So now I might be overreacting, but so at any rate.
Now, we can't legally go negative. So if we balance to 0, then we're restricted and we eventually run out of money and we can't operate because we cannot go negative at the end of the year. We've not done that. Many, many years ago, we were close. We were down to $60,000. But we cannot go below 0. And then going back to a legal aspect, I'm required to certify funds for any expenditure in the school system. Certifying funds means that we have money available, and if we don't have money available, we basically quit paying things. We can't pay.
And as Mark said, that budget doesn't create fund balance. If we budgeted at a certain level and we were to spend all of that money and it was budgeted, but then one of the assumptions we made for revenues was off a bit, if our fines and forfeitures came in $100,000 short, we would be overspent, which is not legal. So we could spend out our budget, but if the revenues at all, any of them that we've assumed, interest income, fines and forfeitures, any of those came in slightly lower and we'd spent all of our budget, that would be bad, with no fund balance.
Right.
And not how any good business would run.
Right.
So we used fund balance, we put some into our next year's budget. We use it, I know we've used it for special projects. We would use it for emergencies. What other examples can you give of how we've used fund balance? If we come short, we need the cushion.
Well, we have some insurance claims, and I would say that's sort of an emergency. We have insurance claims, workers' comp insurance. We have that sitting in our fund balance. So, yeah, I mean, it restricts you to any item that you did not have planned when you present this budget now. If this board made a decision to do something next year, so over the next 14 months, you wouldn't really have a source. You would either have to change the budget you have out there, or you can go to fund balance to fund a project.
We'll go to the commission.
Or go to the commissioners, yes.
And wait to receive it, because if you can't certify it, if the money's not already in the bank, which is a process,
That
even
is
if they're gonna
correct.
bill us out.
So having given bonuses to our bus drivers for retention, for example, would be something that may or may not have come out of fund balance in order to make sure that we have,
Kind of thing you could use it
for
for.
example.
Right.
Any other questions? Comments?
Oh.
Clarifications?
As you,
Bill said, oh, so I'm not sure what that means.
I'd just like to go back and get Dr. Martin's numbers.
Oh, sorry.
sure.
The county has proposed funding level of,
2,063.
what's the total?
425.
So their number was 425, 910, 425.91 million.
Okay, all right. And
You divide that by the 2,633.
which they say is their
Which they say
calculated
is
per
their
pu-
calculated per
per
pupil.
pupil. Okay,
much per pupil?
2,633.
and you come out with
That's
161.
758.45 students.
Okay. And if you look at our budget,
If you look at our budget, page 5,
all right,
you see the total number of students. It includes Wake County Public School students, which is that number that they used. Plus you see the 13,349 charter. It may be 12,286, except that we're anticipating 2 new charter schools being opened. So that gives us a total number of students of 175,106. So if you take their numbers, they're 425.91 million, divide it by the 175,106, you get a per pupil of 2,432.30.
all right.
If, however, you take the 175,000, multiply it by their 2,633, you now have a budget of 461.05 million, which is well above our request of 455.13 million.
Okay.
That's a great argument. I mean, that's a great argument.
So the point is, they recognize the need. It's a matter of, I mean, I hate to say this, but we got gamesmanship going on here. We have need. The need is clear. We've got to find a way to pay for the need.
Right.
And ensuring that the county recognizes the huge omission that we do have to pay those.
Yeah.
We have to pay for the charge.
It's not a choice.
That is not a choice.
That's correct. Mr. Sutton?
And by the way,
Oh,
they
sorry.
did, if you look at the graphs, they did this calculation back in history as well.
Okay. Used to do
So if you look at the county budget and you look at the per capita back through history, charters are left out of that graph.
So, so what is the next step, and how do we communicate this error or omission to them, or did we just effectively do that?
We just effectively did that. However, we will assure, Mr. Winters will double check those numbers and make sure that it is a clear communication back to the county staff that we recognize in their calculations. They don't include our requirement for charter schools, to pay that to charter schools. That's, oh, go ahead.
And so to that point, I guess, I'm sure the media will help us
Yes,
communicate
relay that message.
but should that be something in writing that comes from Mr. Winters or superintendent or whatever?
Yes.
You know, in terms of an official,
Yes, that's what I just said to Martha. He just nicely wrote it down. Mr. Winter will get that to their fiscal staff.
is that in order?
We'll do it like Jeopardy, it'll be in the form of a question.
But it'll be a question from Mark Winters and the CC
I can use
superintendent.
spreadsheets to make declaratives. They
Right.
need to use questions.
That's right.
All right.
But yeah, and I would add to that, as you get a handle on this and their presentation as well, as you have questions, just get them into us and we'll try and provide those answers for you.
Yeah.
Because this will evolve over time, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this process is going to be just as organic and fluid like our budget. It's projections.
By the way, this is exactly why I've been saying for a long time in my conversations with commissioners, we've got to be able to sit down and agree on a set of numbers. Because we should not get to this point where they're looking at our numbers and we're looking at their numbers and everybody's using different numbers. You know, we've got, and I think our audited numbers ought to be numbers that we can both agree on.
Right.
So, I mean, this is not an out of the blue, because I've been having this conversation for quite a long time with several commissioners, that we've got to get to numbers that we can all agree on, and I think it's really important that we understand the totality of what we're talking about.
I mean, I think to Mr. Sutt's point, this time we will formally make sure that they hear this. But it goes back to a conversation, and I mentioned to Ms. Kushner, yet another follow-up for our finance committee to really, for me, after the budget is over, because when we're in the middle of it, we want to make sure that staff gets the right numbers to their manager, who then in turn gets them to their commissioners. But there are clearly, to your point, some historical omissions that we keep having a back and forth about, which I think is just much easier. And I've been saying our audited numbers is the best place for anybody to go because they've been certified.
Mhm.
But to Dr. Bell's point, if you will get your follow-up questions to staff so that we all can have a full understanding so that we're able to continue to engage in this conversation.
Well, I did also want to highlight yesterday's presentation from the county manager did highlight growth and how much we are growing in Wake County and mental health supports. And, you know, that melds with our priorities as well, that we are, you know, in our budget looking to fund our growth, looking for, you know, additional counselors and other social workers and other mental health supports for our teachers. So we have some confluence of goals. Clearly, they've placed a high stake on having competitive salaries for their employees. We've done this similarly. So I think that we have some shared goals that we can work toward before they finalize their budget.
And I think, you know, again, we can continue to remind the commissioners that this year we did not create that budget in a vacuum. Commissioners were engaged in the conversation, hence I think we see some alignment in their presentation that they received yesterday from their manager. That's very similar to the goals that we've talked about. And so, again, the benefit of talking about this early and openly was so that we would see this alignment and clearly saying, thank you for the language alignment, but we also need budget alignment to actually bring all those things to fruition that we both clearly agree with in writing so far. So I appreciate that we've had the conversation. And, you know, I've also been saying, and I'll keep echoing, that was the manager's recommendation. And so we didn't have that conversation with the manager. These conversations about our goals have been with commissioners. And so that's who we continue to have that dialogue with as board members, is back to our commissioners about
And I
alignment
think
of our goals.
tagging on to you is that it's really important that we continue to talk to all of our schools and our families. And the commissioners have made it crystal clear that they want to hear. And they are not hearing. And we need to make sure that we are having conversations with them, all of them, so that we can one-on-one answer their questions on the things that we can. But I just think it's really important that we contact our commissioners and continue that dialogue and let them know that this is what our families are saying, and that this is the kind of school system that we want. I keep going back to that list of things we're not funding. All those, that long list that's exemplary when we can do those things. And so what we're asking for is really a drop compared to what we could be asking for if we were to meet all of the needs of all of our kids in our district.
So, I'm sorry.
I know staff has looked at the entire county budget. There's not another line item somewhere in the county budget that's an allocation for charter schools, which has been suggested by some legislation that hasn't passed.
We really haven't had enough time to work through all theirs.
Okay,
But,
all
I mean,
right.
it's something to look for.
Okay, but the history has been that the appropriation to us includes the appropriation for charter school.
I did not see it in the presentation, but I have not looked at it.
Okay, all right.
I've looked.
You just only had 24 hours, it's okay.
Yeah.
I didn't go to bed very early.
I was going to say.
Mark stayed at home late. Well, just again, as I said, if we could get talking points, I said that for our parents and our BAC, you talked to BAC today, if we can get kind of consistent talking points about our budget, we can give them to our PTA chair and BAC. We have a 1 page.
It's a full
No, I don't want a 4-page. We need an
We'll
infographic.
print it smaller.
Well, that'll help my PTA president.
I think Ms. Cassius really means it has to be digestible for the layman.
Yeah, for them to put in an email without digressing or anything, and that the commissioners would read. I know Mr. Winters can do that for us in his spare time.
I know, as he digests the whole budget. Anyone else? And if not, please, to Dr. Merrill's point, please make sure staff gets those questions. And they'll do as they always do, give us a great summary of all those answers, and that as board members, the pieces that are important to us in terms of how we want to talk about it, we'll have that in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good times ahead.
Well, every other department's asking. Every other department's asking that too. That's a good question.
I do want to say good catch by Dr. Martin.
yeah.
As always, we appreciate your thorough analysis.
That's always my email too. I appreciate your thoroughness and the time that you should take to digest. I appreciate it.
Both the critical thinking and thorough analysis.
He was using technology as a tool, by the way.
Yes.
Oh, that's a good one. What a good one.
Preach that. This is technology as a tool, not as a learning device.
I'm impressed that he can process things that quickly personally.
As a flashlight or hammer.
And he can do it at 2 in the morning and be coherent.
And he's got access to all the old records.
Well, I don't know. I think he needs another drive to Ohio to really enhance
The
it.
reason, that number just looked,
Yeah.
the 2633, because I've been keeping track of these numbers for years, and I got it back through history.
Goodness,
And it's just like,
I'm glad you have it.
we'll take it.
Yeah.
It's still about $400 below Guilford County.
Another great.
Really?
Another great topic. We're ready for you all.
Okay. Good afternoon.
He's like, I was here for budget. It will be.
Of today, exactly.
As soon as we get that budget passed. it'll be.
Yeah, exactly. We'll deal with this item later.
But y'all can't
I
wait.
appreciate the honesty.
Good idea. But y'all can't wait to get back to the truck.
And then they're gonna say, stay tuned, assignments on the horizon.
Run into the truck.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, you still here?
I love this place.
Like gamesmanship. Oh, yeah.
Bring on the second wave of fun.
Well, we all be at 11 o'clock.
Okay. So as we do at near the end of the school year every year, we bring to the board a high-level overview of the principles that will be driving the next year's enrollment plan. So we're going to talk to you a little bit today about the things that we know we need to address as the part of the 18-19 enrollment plan, and are looking for certainly any additional feedback or information or direction that you need to provide as we look forward to doing that. You'll see that we're having to change things a little bit. There are a number of different influences that are occurring that we'll have to address. And Glenn is going to take the presentation. Laura is here for questions as well. We've got Mike Miller in the audience. So I'm hopeful that we can answer questions or direct them appropriately.
We've got 4 new board members. It's nice to work with you, and good luck this year. So on slide 3.
Come on, Glenn, you gotta work with me.
We took the bullet last year, I think.
That was genuine.
I appreciate it, Glenn, I do.
That's what was so funny.
Laura, is this how you trained Glenn?
So it is year 4 of a multi-year approach, so that's why we know that not everyone's been here for the prior 3 years.
Okay, so what we'd like to do is just get some direction, like Kathy had said, and some feedback based on a couple different items today. We're going to go through enrollment growth. We'll talk about new schools that'll be opening. We'll review policy 4150, specifically the 4 pillars that we use for the assignment plan, and then the scope and timeline of the enrollment plan. Okay?
Okay.
So talking about growth, we've got updated projections, the January 2017 data that we'll be using with the projected numbers. So you'll see that in the next couple slides. Just a recap of what it's going to tell you is over the last 8 years, we're expected to grow about 23,000 students, close to that, which translates to almost 2,800 students per year.
The next 8 years.
The next 8 years, sorry.
Is it spread across the grades, or even, is it spread out K-12 fairly evenly?
That's a good question.
No, what we're seeing is the kindergarten flat curve that we've seen for the last 5 years, since 2011, has had an impact on elementary school. The current model assumes that that trend will reverse itself, and we'll start seeing more kindergartners coming into the system. So that means by the end of the forecast, the elementary schools are a larger cohort than they are currently.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. So with K-3s ramping up again. All right.
And isn't my recollection, we also always get a 9th grade bump?
Yes, sir, every year.
Every year, 9th grade bump, because our schools are excellent.
I did a quick calculation too. If it's 2,800 kids a year, and if you just divide that by 180 school days, that's about 16 children a day. So if you're looking at K-3 class sizes, that's almost a classroom a day. You know, so that's still a lot of growth coming our way.
That's a good bite sound.
Yeah.
Good sound bite.
In growth.
Yeah.
Wow.
In growth.
In growth from last year.
Yes, we need a new classroom every day.
And so slide 5, you can see how it projects out, the bar graph that we've used previously. Again, you can see that steady growth that we've had since 2008-9, all the way projecting out to 2024-25. So on slide 6.
Oh, I did want to stop for just a minute.
That's okay, prerogative. You're
Glenn
still
wouldn't let me. I wanted to put a picture up.
Oh.
But we are growing all over North Carolina. Our pig Pearl had 4 piglets last week. And they are the cutest things. I wanted to show you a picture, but you wouldn't let me. Everywhere.
That would have been what would have been on the news.
There's growth all around.
Wait, kind of growing.
Laura really does want to talk.
So on slide 6, we've got the map that shows the net gains. This year, it's showing from 2012-13 to 16-17. The map on the left there goes along with the column in the middle. So what you can see is we're seeing our highest net gain in the west-north, the southwest, the near east, which just so happens to be, again, where we're opening new schools.
Hooray.
Question?
We are building new schools in the red areas. Always good to say, I think.
I wanted to point out too, it's the same hot spots we showed you last year. And what I think is a little bit incredible is if you look at the west-north, what the data isn't showing you, but from last year to this year, in the West North, we grew by 1,044 students. That's pretty incredible.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
Looking at,
Mr. Sutton?
just sort of looking at that, I mean, what inferences, I guess, can you make about growth patterns in the county? I mean, it looks like there's kind of a outward migration from the center of the county. Is that sort of a reasonable assumption? I also see where the Far East, there's kind of one coming in. So is I guess just in terms of migration patterns, if you will, what assumptions, if any, can you make, or trends can you?
We'll let Mike speak to that.
Thank you. I think over the 10 years, the trend has been very clear with very strong growth, especially in Northwest Cary. But that is certainly moving in a counterclockwise way through Holly Springs, through Apex, which is seeing a lot of stuff right now. Holly Springs, and we're beginning to see a lot more in Fuquay than we did 5 years ago, and we're signs in Garner. So it seems to be moving in that direction and progressing to the southern area of the county. Still strong in the north, but the southern areas are by far what's pushing it, and the Near East.
We can all take a drive
strong
down
growing
55
for 5 years now.
Along with 540's construction, it's going to continue.
Correct.
What do you attribute the decline in the central area over the next?
That's a great question. A big part of that is the nature of the model itself. Not to go too far into the weeds, but we have 2,800 kids a year to put in the model. The model tries to figure out where the best place to put them according to our planning data, which is updated every year. And what happens is when you have the Wendell Falls and Meridians and the places up north and all these fairly large and fast-moving developments, the model tends to attract students to those. So what happens in Central, where we have not seen strong growth at all, it's fairly flat in Central. That part actually declines. I believe that number is too low.
As I said, there's tremendous
Which number is too low?
building.
The one on the very top.
But is it a different clientele
It
that's
is.
building?
It is.
I also think you're gonna see.
That are not having to.
I don't think that we're seeing the tipping point. At this point, we're not seeing the tipping point where the residential development in the central area is producing the kinds of kids. When we started this study 10 years ago, North Hills was brand new, 0 kids in there. Now we got about 3 dozen kids. So it does happen. It doesn't happen like subdivisions do. So we will continue to see, and we continue to monitor it.
So here we've got the new seats, the new schools that we'll be building. The outlined in green there up at the top, I don't know if you can really see it. These are the schools that are funded from CIP 2013. There's actually 18 schools that are in there. 15 of the schools were in CIP 2013, with the exception of Apex Friendship High School, which was from leftover funds from CIP 2006. And then 2 SNAP projects, Crossroads Flex and the Northway College and Career Academy, which were also built during that same time frame.
That's a big year.
So here we're looking at the schools in the red for 18-19. We're going to be opening Bryan Road Elementary, Buckhorn Creek Elementary, Apex Friendship Middle School, South Garner High School, and then you can see Green Level High School, which is pushed out to 1920. We're planning to build it during that year, but it'll serve as a swing space for Apex High School starting next year for 2 years while they renovate Apex High School. Garner High School will still be in the South Garner High School this coming school year, and then we'll move out for when South Garner comes in 18-19. All right, and we're always looking ahead. So you can see the schools that are below that line, these are not currently funded, but we are planning for them. They're part of the 7-year plan. Okay, there's 11 schools, including 4 SNAP schools, that are part of that plan.
And the swing space for Fuquay High.
Say again?
The future Willow Springs High
Willow
School.
Springs High School,
swing
yes.
space.
Yeah, in the gray there, that's the swing space. It'll be, the building will be constructed, but it'll be serving as a swing space.
And same for E24, you see, it's swinging, it's swing for style renovations and York renovations. So we like to include what's in the future there. We certainly include it in all our planning too.
I think it's also important just to note that another reason we talk about this, and you'll see this sometimes and we may forget to mention it, is as we make assignment patterns for new schools that open, you also, because a pillar in the plan is stability, don't want to move families too often, so you really have to project out what other schools are coming on in that area so that you can apply the pillar of stability as well, even to the extent possible when you're opening new schools.
Okay. So here we've got all of the schools from CIP 2013 and where they're located. The color-coded years designate the year that they were opened. The schools in red that we'll get to later on, you'll see. Those are the ones that we'll be talking about for this year's assignment plan. So here's our 7-year plan. We've got 3 different maps, one for elementary, one for middle, and one for high school. And these are, the circles are areas where we're looking to purchase land. The stars would be an acquired site. So these, just to give you a little heads up of what we're thinking about coming up for the next 7 years for each of these levels.
That's a quick question for the star that's in a circle. Does that mean we have a site that's needed, but then we also need an additional site in that circle?
I think if you're looking up in the northwest there, E50, we have that site, but we're also looking for E52.
Okay.
They just happen to kind of overlap.
That's how dense that growth is.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, E50 is the star, E52 is what we're looking for.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah. And the same with M16 and M7.
Right here.
Yeah, they're very close, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So now, the 4 pillars, policy 4150. These are the 4 pillars that we use when we start drafting the assignment plan and what drives the work that we're going to be doing. Student achievement, we're trying to minimize the high concentrations of low-performing students and students from low-income families at each school, trying to make the schools equitable. Okay. Stability, as Kathy had just mentioned, you know, we are looking ahead to future years and not trying to affect students to move them multiple times in a short period of time. Proximity, trying to find a reasonable distance between the school and the homes that are located in the base attendance area. And then operational efficiency, trying to minimize our under-enrolled schools and our overcrowded schools, but also maximizing transportation efficiencies.
Let me just comment here, not for debate at this moment, but in our recent discussions, we have operational efficiency can have many different meanings. And one of the efficiencies that we haven't necessarily paid enough attention to is that of our multi-track program in terms of adding capacity to the district. And somewhere in our discussion of these elements, I would like to make sure that that's considered. We're building schools and opening schools, but we're not removing trailers from campuses. What we are doing is shifting kids from free seats in a multi-track school to the new seats that we just built through our choice plan and other things. So I would like for us to, somewhere in our discussion, to hash out that whole process and what's the right position for us to take moving forward.
Right, so here we are in year 4. Go ahead. Sorry.
Ms. Cashman. I just want to ask, I can't remember, when was this policy adopted? 4150?
2010, I believe.
No.
Oh, it was like 12.
No, it was
maybe.
12.
Maybe it was 12.
Well, this is a policy you've been following since 2012.
Yeah, Dr. Gainey was superintendent, interim superintendent.
I was chairing the policy committee.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
It's
sorry.
2012.
Okay, thanks.
Sort of in that regard, and I guess thinking about sort of historically, when we had policy 6300, 6200, and we were sort of following our socioeconomic piece, And then we sort of started getting hit with the growth. It was difficult for us to kind of maintain or adhere to that policy in trying to manage, arguably, to try to manage growth. I feel like when we look at 4150, I think we've done a good job, in my opinion, around stability, proximity, and operational efficiency. I think arguably most will probably agree, maybe not, that we haven't done as bang-up job in the student achievement part of it. And I think, again, that's been part of us trying to manage growth and looking at efficiency and that sort of piece. So as we're going into the fourth year, is this the time or is next year to perhaps look at the student achievement piece and how we might alter that or look at that in some way in terms of figuring out how we might focus more on the concentrations of low-performing students and how or if, and that might be part of the question, is if we use assignment as a strategy for doing that. Because if you look at these last 3 or 4 years, we haven't really done a good job of that. So I think it raises the fundamental question. One,
Yes.
is assignment a place to do that? I would argue that it is, but I think part of the challenge has been relying on that as sort of the sole or only strategy as opposed to a assortment, a comprehensive list of strategies, that being one. And then if so, then is student achievement the lever, if you will, as opposed to, or at least looking at other factors, be it, family income, educational attainment, some other factors that perhaps legally, I think, could be considered or used, census data or others. So I know that's a big question, but my main point is, when is the time, I guess, to look at that? Is that as we go into this fourth year or looking ahead?
Well, for 18-19, it is now.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what we've
Okay.
been talking about, yeah.
For 18-19, it would be now. I could write a dissertation on the assignment plan over the last 10 years or so.
I'm sure.
But the primary driver for several years was only move students as required by the opening of a new school. And about a year and a half or so ago, we had a board retreat where there was consensus that, and it was part of our action plan moving forward, that we would look at assignment as a strategy where it made sense in collaboration with the other 3 pillars in looking at schools that were in relative close proximity to each other that had enough dissimilarity that an assignment strategy would make sense. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Okay. Just do it. So that's where we're looking at places where any 2 schools that are close to each other that are sufficiently dissimilar, that are close enough that we should be able to use assignment as a strategy there. So we've done some of that. We did it some with the opening of Pleasant Grove and Leesville Road Elementary and York. We're looking at it some moving forward in the 18-19. You'll see a little bit as we move forward. But as you see what we've already identified, we are asking for your feedback on additional places where we need to look at that. And if the strategy is moving beyond schools that are in close proximity to each other, then that's a much deeper discussion, because then you go back to what are the levers that you pull that tell you this is what is the decision maker that you need to do something. So.
We said that one.
And how do we have a priority like student achievement that doesn't get bumped or is hard to maintain as a priority because of the pressure coming from growth and everything else? We know growth is coming. We know growth is a reality.
That's right.
So
I think it's,
we have it out here as, we know that, we want to be intentional about having student achievement and the focus on concentration of low-performing students, but it ends up being the one that sort of ends up getting the back seat.
Right.
Because we're opening new schools and we've got to manage growth,
right,
and we want the proximity and efficiency and that sort of thing. So
I would say you look at your data and you set a goal.
And how do we, I guess the other thing I would add, and I'm not gonna put words in Mr. Sutton's mouth, but how do we also keep student achievement as a primary factor in all of our decision-making, right? Because again, when you get caught up in the growth is over here, but that's not where I local public schools, it is easy to get swept into we need seats. So how do, I guess for me, I'm asking all of us is how do we hold the balance of both of those every time we talk about enrollment?
I think again, it's measuring to a goal, and we have to reassign not just when we open new schools. And that's what we have to do as a board.
And we can go to our lovely sheet that you all gave us that's very well color-coded of where we know, our, I mean, seriously, because I guess that's why I'm asking about how do we hold it center? Because we've said this before, and we lose it because we get swept into the growth.
Opening new schools.
Right.
Okay.
I don't have an answer.
I think you'll see some things as we move forward, and there's certainly space for more, and we'll circle back around at the end, I think.
So yeah, so if the time is now, then
Yeah.
just, I guess, if us as a board, or I don't know if it's in facilities committee, or that staff beginning to think about what those goals are, what the indicators are, that we start having that conversation. And I don't know exactly where that takes place, but.
And when, because you've said now, but now like we need to put it in a committee. I guess those are all questions we need to answer. Mr.
Like be on the board forecast, or what gets it on the.
Well, we need
front
to
burner and
update the
keeps
map
it
that
there.
Mr. Benton had asked us to all create at that last, that February, whenever it was, board retreat, that was the trigger for, these are some immediate places that some work can be done. Right.
I believe there's a timeline at the end of this presentation, which will tell us what now means.
Okay.
Right.
Because they want to release a plan in October or November.
This what happened, Ms. Goodwin.
So
you can make it happen in facilities?
We're going to be working this summer.
And also recognizing that because of growth, we're limited in our land. So we have some schools that we're building that are in kind of awkward spaces. It's not a school in a circle. It's a school and a blob around it. I don't know how to describe it better.
It's not nice and neat.
An amoeba.
An amoeba. There
Well,
we go.
and actually, and related to that, we have to recognize housing patterns, and again, both short-term but longer-term, the commissioners, as our partners, have talked about affordable housing, and I think we need to be cognizant of that, those conversations about how we look at housing patterns in this county.
Which, one thing I want to put a pin in that you reminded me of that I whispered over here is when Ms. Hartenstein, I think it was you, brought up central part of our county. I mean, the reality is the change is going to happen, right? I mean, so I guess I would also want to see us forecasting to our best ability that the change is going to happen because of the cost of living now in the central part of Raleigh.
One thing that I would add, I mean, in some instances, the board just sets policy and then administration implements. This is a situation where you've set policy, it does have the parameters, it does allow some degree of flexibility, but then it also comes back to the board with the plan itself that you have the opportunity to approve or not approve, and to have more detail around your priorities in that plan. So it doesn't necessarily, if there's a shift, it doesn't necessarily have to be in policy. It can be as a part of the plan.
I'm hoping it's those goals that we make that Mr. Sutton just talked about so that staff knows when those levers are. Thank you, Mr. Goulden.
So for the sake of trying to catch us back up here on time, I'm just
Not bad.
gonna go through the next couple slides. We've got the schools that are opening, and then some schools that may be impacted in the enrollment draft. So you just take a look. We've got Bryan Road. You can see it's located, the school's located in the Creech Road attendance space as it is right now.
Just as a quick reminder for all of these maps as we go through them quickly, we draw the impact zone to show every school that could be impacted. That does not mean that the students in the new school will all come from all of those areas. But when you start moving, there are dominoes that fall in different places and you need to make adjustments. So this is the sphere of impact that's not the same as the base attendance area that will be drawn from it.
Okay.
Okay. All right, and then over to
So
Buckhorn.
just a question, this green map over here in Buckhorn Creek,
We're not there yet.
That's
Oh,
where they're.
I thought we were there.
We're there now, yes.
We're there now.
So which school is that?
Willow Springs.
The green,
Willow Springs, year-round.
Okay, all right.
And just getting back to what we had talked about earlier, you see E35 is in the Willow Springs base attendance area as well, so we'll be thinking about that as we propose a draft one.
Okay.
Buckhorn Creek is currently in the Holly Grove Elementary attendance area up there on the top left. Okay, perfect. Sorry. Colorblind. Moving on to Apex Friendship Middle School. It's on the same campus as Apex Friendship High School. It's currently sitting in the Apex Middle School base attendance area. You can see some of the schools that may be impacted: Apex Middle School, Holly Ridge Middle School, and Holly Grove Middle School. Okay.
And what is the wide area to the north?
Salem
Lufkin Road.
and Lufkin.
It's on Chapel Base, Lufkin Road.
Okay.
yes.
So the Lufkin base is not going to be impacted by Apex Friendships opening, or? No?
Well, we don't think so?
Okay. 'Cause
Nothing's
it's
in
right
concrete.
Yeah.
there.
Today's modeling, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so not in concrete, but just in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then South Garner High School. You can see in the blue section there, it's within the Garner High School attendance area. Some of the schools that may be impacted: Enloe High School, Garner High School, Knightdale High School, Middle Creek High School, and Southeast Raleigh High School. Yeah. And then on to Green Level High School.
Okay, we put green level in the presentation because some time ago, we were asked to consider opening green level a year early. He's like, how can that be? Because Apex Friendship, or Apex High School is in the building. So the thought was, well, open it with just 9th grade, okay? In the same building as Apex High School. As you can imagine, the principal at Apex High School, her eyes got really big. I was like, whoa.
that'd be
So
easy.
we're looking at that because you asked us to look at it, but it's really not looking like that's going to be possible.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't think it's going to be the headline tomorrow because you've had so many good headlines already today.
Absolutely genius.
We try to
I
remember
don't know if it'll
things
fit in
that come
140
up.
characters. It'll be out there somewhere.
Yeah, okay, so we put it in there, we'll bring you details about it, but it's not looking like that's really gonna be possible.
But it is a good
okay?
question.
It is a good question.
It is a good question, but we did split the overflow, remember? Starting next year, half of Panther overflows to Green Hope, and the other half overflows to Apex at Green Level. So that should help some, and I think we probably can make it through till the to 1920. And then on page 17, the YMCA school, which has not officially been named yet, but
Yeah, I thought it was wasn't it
Is
Sutton
it-
Elementary or Keith Sutton?
oh yeah, the Keith Sutton Elementary School. Forgot.
We do not name schools after individuals.
Unless we
Well, anyway, it is.
6 months.
Yeah. You need to get in 6 months, we can do it.
Get out over your
All right, the Y school is scheduled to open in 1920, and we're not really talking about any changes in that timeline at all. But our partners, the Y and the community folks, have asked us, could we develop that attendance area a year early because they want to work with the community, and we said yes, we could do that. So we are going to bring this to you a year early, okay?
Interesting. Okay. Proactive.
So operational efficiency, we're looking at trying to increase the base attendance areas for the following elementary schools and middle schools. Okay.
We've talked about these at different points over the last year, okay?
And then we'll also be revisiting the move from 2 years ago with Conn Elementary, the part of the Conn Elementary base moving to Underwood. Okay.
I heard sounds down here, I'll be interested in hearing them.
Well, you'll notice that the elementary and middle schools are sort of an intersection of schools that are either under-enrolled and partially due to a small attendance area, or in Brooks's case, a renovation that has increased their capacity.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
there's
And the
different
same with
reasons.
Green.
And Green.
We had increased capacity.
But they're not
at Green.
that far from each other.
Correct.
either.
Right.
Really could share.
So there's some work that can be done
Yeah,
there.
that'll
Neighborhoods.
happen.
While still allowing for some room for
Magnet.
choice students through
Right.
magnet.
Because both are magnet, correct.
And as
Douglas
always,
is in there too. It's in Milton.
as always, we'll look at our overcrowded schools. We've got 10 cap schools for the 17-18 school year. They're listed here, so we'll always try to find ways, see if we can relieve some of the crowding in some of those schools as well. So here we've got a year-round calendar utilization. We'll be looking at application feeder pattern changes to increase utilization. We're also just reminding you of the school calendar changes that we had discussed previously, that these are still there. And then K-3 class size capacity, just bringing it to your attention that we'll be reviewing elementary schools that do not have space to achieve the class size mandates.
So the first, the one about application feeder pattern changes, that's something that we know we can go ahead and implement to look at addressing what the demand is and where the demand is and spread that out for our schools to better utilize year-rounds. That's one piece. The calendar changes, I feel compelled to say at this point that we're either not making any changes to 18-19 or you're giving us direction to revisit them. Okay? Because otherwise, we're just letting you know we've talked about these, but we're not doing anything for 18-19 because if we do, we need to include it as part of the enrollment plan. And because obviously there's an impact. So I'm just going to leave that there. And then the K-3 class size capacity, obviously, as you know, with the need to reduce class sizes, there is a facility impact, a capital impact, and we're going to put together a group that Joe and some folks will lead and bring back to you all of the wonderful options that we have to meet that mandate. And that will have an impact on the enrollment plan because of how what the capacity is at schools, what our current cap schools are, what that looks like in the future, or how we may need, or if assignment plays a role in that solution as well.
On that,
Sorry, I just had a quick question. The K-3 class size will possibly impact the school calendar changes, right? I mean, it's kind of hard.
And that's another reason that if it comes off and we're waiting, then that's okay.
Okay, yeah, so that's kind of why I'm thinking.
Because we do not anticipate that, for example, any of the single-track schools will need to go multi-track again because of the class size change, but certainly that is a possibility. So if you're looking at a suite of options for how to address under-enrollment in schools at the same time that you're looking at the K-3 class size change, waiting another year or taking this off the table
Might be possible.
could certainly make sense, and
Okay.
right now it's off the table.
Okay.
That's what I was about to say, so I want to clarify, currently it is off the table, and to Ms.
Yeah.
Cash's point, that's
It's a good reason, one reason why.
so the superintendent said something during our budget discussion. I just want you to clarify, assuming nothing changes in the state budget class size for the following year, the 2018-19 year, and the class sizes are 17, 16, 16, 18, up to where is the situation where we have to add another teacher? Is it at student 18 in kindergarten? Or student 21 in kindergarten? Is the three, there's no three float, or there's a three float within a building or within a grade level?
Okay. There is a 3 float in any individual class, but there is no float in the district average.
Okay.
So if the kindergarten class size is 18, you may have a kindergarten somewhere that can go up to 21, but your district average may not go above 18.
You better have one that's 15.
And so you got to have one that's 15
1-to-1.
somewhere in order to do that.
Okay.
And so that's the issue, is we cannot tell schools that they have a float. because we won't meet the district class size average.
Right. All right, that's gonna be an interesting thing to manage.
It's called local government.
Children show up, you know, every day, 16
The
a
whole
day.
class shows up every day.
Yeah, 16 every day.
Only they all came to the same school, the same grade level, and then, you know.
And there was space.
Well, alternating.
So to just kind of bring it back
Right.
around,
Well, yeah.
this next slide just kind of brings us back to, we're looking for feedback. We're looking to give you more of an understanding of what we're doing when we come to draft one, but also getting some direction from the board. And then we have the timeline moving forward.
Can I say, you don't have to give us direction right this minute, okay, but we do want your feedback. I did write 3 things down that I heard today, that you wanted to look at the student achievement pillar. You wanted us to look at that a little more carefully. You wanted an update on Mr. Benton's maps that showed the county free reduced lunch, I believe. And then Mr. Fletcher wanted some more information about mobile and temporary classroom movement. And I think, Joe, you heard that. Is that what you asked about? When we open new schools, what becomes of the mobile and temporary
Right.
classrooms? Yeah. Kind of your plate, Joe.
I think it was Mr. Fletcher.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what we're
Joe got this look on his face like WTH.
You sure will.
I have 2 questions. On page 19, when we're looking at overcrowded schools, given that, as an example, that Parkside Elementary is coming on not in 18-19, but 19-20, I'm assuming that's going to affect what impact we look at for Cedar Fork.
Correct.
Right.
Okay,
Correct.
just to be clear. And then also, I need a little clarity on how the timing of the school calendar decisions, where are they in this timeline that we have to make sure that we make those decisions for this 18-19 enrollment plan?
So right now, all of the school calendar changes, we were reminding you of the calendar changes that we had proposed for 18-19 as a part of the strategy with regards to whether it was addressing under-enrolled schools or feeder patterns or some other things. But from the last time that we've talked about this, those are completely off the table, so they will not be, the calendar changes will not be a part of the 18-19 enrollment plan unless the board directs us otherwise. And I just haven't seen us, we don't seem to have that. There are reasons why it makes sense to wait a year.
Yes.
I agree.
Okay, and then back to the timeline. It's a little different. We're here today, top of the line. Normally, we bring draft 1 in August. We are not comfortable that we will have sufficient information about the class size impact in elementaries by that time in order to bring it in August. So we are delaying draft 1 until September, October, depending on how all of that pans out. And we're only bringing 2 drafts as opposed to 3. We will have the board advisory committees as we've had in the past, so that board members have an opportunity to have a presentation with their BACs between draft 1 and draft 2. We'll do the community input sessions after draft 2, and then we'll turn it over to the board. We're still looking for public hearing, work session, and approval by the end of November. That's always our plan. Sometimes it gets delayed, like it did last year at one meeting. So, but there's not a board election this time, but we are sensitive to that. And then, we'll have to have some flexibility here. But I wanted to just call your attention to a condensed timeline, 2 drafts, not 3.
Thank you.
Mr. Phillips?
So then on this schedule, should there be a line where there's in the summer the conversation about the policy piece? Because I mean that would require policy change or something.
Well, whether it's a change or a direction in how we implement or interpret, because in some cases, the enrollment principles, the principles of the assignment plan are defined some. but the achievement one is less defined in terms of what lever it is you pull that makes you say, okay, this is one where you have to do something. That's not been defined.
So I do feel like it's a conversation, less, with the summer, Mr. Fletcher and Ms. Kushner went with me to Garner, and it's gonna be the reminder. I looked at Buckhorn and had the same impulse reaction of, how do we make sure these schools are healthy, and that's the student achievement health at those schools as we're looking at those assignments. So I personally am saying, I feel like for me, that's a large philosophical discussion for us to have as a board, so that you all have some clear direction of what's that lever to ensure that we have health at all those schools, Garner, Buckhorn, all the ones that just gave you a little,
So what we can plan to do is if we revive and update the map and maybe put together some information as a starting point to sort of tease out what the direction might be and have that conversation.
okay.
And that would need to happen probably in the next month or so.
Yeah, June.
Okay.
Thank you. This way, all right. Thank you all very much. Guys, back on track. So it's roughly 5:17, so I would recommend you take a little bit of break. We have lots of people, folks in schools to recognize, so we'll be back in our seats by 5:30. Out front.